Okay, for the next keynote of the day, which is making independent films today, it's coming. I would like to welcome on stage, he's a member of the jury and comes from Massive Studios. He's a director. Please welcome Reza Sixo Safai.
Check. Can you guys hear me okay? Bonjour. Unfortunately, je ne parle pas beaucoup de français, so here we are. Voilà. Thank you so much to the apologies with the, well, it's an ode to Jean-Luc Godard, the sunglasses. Now, I'm very jet-lagged and very sensitive to light. But I just wanted to thank the festival and everyone involved for having us here. And it's been a really wonderful event thus far. And I didn't want to do kind of a traditional, PowerPoint presentation or, show you like a cool reel and all that stuff. I just wanted to do the, I guess the opposite of an AI thing, which is kind of like a human to human, really simple kind of conversation. And frankly, I get really bored with those kind of speeches and stuff, but, no offense to anybody else. And, if you were at the event last night, the most amazing thing, there was a lot of, wonderful things with AI, but of course, the thing that excited everybody and got them out of their seats was the 9-year-old violinist prodigy, right? And which I kind of found really beautiful, that at an AI event, watching a human being do something miraculous was what got everybody up to their feet in a genuine manner and applauding for a long time. I was asked basically to speak about my past as a filmmaker and what was the other thing they asked me to do? They said, speak about your past as a filmmaker, how you came to AI, and what Massive Studios is doing. And what I should do is probably, is there a timer? Because I can go on for a long time. Can someone give me a 5-minute warning? Is that okay? Yeah? Okay. So I wanted to speak about that a little bit, but, I also, because I absolutely love Cannes, and it's, for many reasons, but the biggest reason being that it is the greatest film festival and probably the most important film festival in the world is in Cannes. And some of the most incredible filmmakers have been discovered here, not only because of Thierry Frémaux, but also because of Pierre Résion, God rest his soul, who I got to know. I am very fortunate that my very first film festival that I had a movie at was the Cannes Film Festival. I come from a traditional filmmaking background, and I was so green and had no knowledge about anything that I wasn't even considering to come. and my friend said, Reza, this is crazy. You need to go. This is the most important film festival in the world. And I absolutely fell in love with it. And I wanted to talk about a little bit about just the importance of cinema in a movie theater, because I actually consider the movie theater a sacred place, and I'll get a little bit into that about why personally to me, but I'm willing to bet that most people who are filmmakers at some point as a child were sitting in a movie theater, looking up at these flickering images, having this kind of waking dream, and they were transported and taken to another world and needed to do that again. And I still find it really miraculous that the lights go down and you can be in a room full of people that you don't know, that could be, are of different races, of different religions, different ideologies, and yet you can share this common experience together. And that there's literally an electricity that happens between us. So, for me, like some people go to, church or synagogue, or the mountains, nature. But for me to connect with, what I call the great mystery or the divine, I go to the cinema. And, I will say that, the way I look at it is when I'm sitting there and I get lost in what's happening here, when I completely forget who I am and I'm just lost in this story, it's usually a time when the filmmaker or the actor and all together have also been lost and living in the moment of their movie. And somewhere in between that is where I experience the divine. And I find that incredible. But just to go back a little bit, the very first time I went to a movie theater, I was born in Iran. And this is when the relations between Iran and the US were very good. And believe it or not, there was a time for that. And I pointed to a picture in the newspaper when I was 2 years old. And my parents were kind enough to then take me. I had no idea what was going on, but it was a picture of Robin Hood, Disney's Robin Hood animation film. And I was sitting in a movie theater, and of course, like these giant, characters and the colors and the music, I was mesmerized. Now, for whatever reason, my parents weren't very big moviegoers, but I didn't go to a cinema for many years after that. Now, when the revolution took place in Iran, which is frankly a misnomer because it was so bloody, it was more like a civil war. And forgive me, some of the things I'm going to talk about, I want to get really personal, but I may get emotional. There was a film called The Deer. The movie came out in 1974 and stayed in the cinemas for 4 years. And it was, it starred one of the greatest, most popular Iranian actors, Behrouz Vossoughi. And in 1978, the doors were locked in the cinema. It was called the Rec Cinema, and it was very close to where I lived. And everybody in that cinema died because this, current government had locked the doors and set the theater on fire. And they estimate between 370 to 470 people were killed in the cinema. It was the greatest terrorist act of its kind in the world. This terror, permeated everybody, everything we talked about in my family, all of our friends. We, of course, not of course, but we also had friends and family killed and tortured. But this haunted me, as a child. And we were very fortunate to escape Iran. And I became friends. We lived in Pennsylvania for a little while, and I became friends with some American kids. And I got invited to go to the cinema with them. They wanted to see Empire Strikes Back. And I didn't want to go because I thought that if I went there, I would die. Now, in whatever kind of wisdom that my parents had at the time, they suggested that I should go. They were trying to comfort me. I got in the car with my friends. They're talking about normal things, and I'm 8 years old. They're talking about normal things that an 8-year-old should be speaking about. I am just sitting there quiet, terrified, what's going to happen to me? And I remember fondly, the lights go down, I get transported to a galaxy far, far away, and I completely forgot my fears, where I was. I was just, in this story. But the really amazing moment was when the lights came up and I started to have, like, it was the first time where I had tears of joy, because when the lights came up, I knew I was really free, that I was gonna live and that I was gonna be okay. And so the cinema for me, you know, is a very sacred space. And okay, well, so, you know, I'm not gonna, obviously, you know, I didn't want to get into workflows and all that stuff, because honestly, they they change every week with AI. So whatever I tell you now, you know, might be different because the technology changes. But you know, let me fast forward a little bit to why I got into AI. And again, you know, I'm not here to defend AI or rail against it. You know, it's at this point, I know it's human made, but at this point, it's like if it's like lightning doesn't need defending. You know what I mean? It's going to happen. But what happened with me was during the strikes that we had in Hollywood, I had a movie that was greenlit, and then it went away during the strikes, and everybody was talking about AI. And I think because I come from Iran, I have a healthy skepticism about what I'm being told, and I have to investigate it for myself. And I grew up in Palo Alto, and my father was a inventor at Hewlett-Packard Labs, so I was always around technology, but you know, I was always interested in using it to tell stories and make art. And you know, so when Photoshop first came out, or when the Adobe Premiere or Final Cut Pro, you know, I was one of the first to use it, digital cameras, etc. So, you know, and I was just like, I don't believe what they're telling me about this AI. Let me check it out myself. Thank you. So that led to, you know, me joining very early on one of the, it was with Pika at the time, joining one of the creative partner programs. But I have to tell you, well, actually, before I joined it, I joined the Discord, and it was a very small community at the time. But I immediately fell in love with this because, you know, as someone who needs to create, I mean, literally, I mean, I would die, I feel like. At least it feels that way. Maybe it's too dramatic to say that, but if I don't do something, and the fact that I could create something so quickly just completely blew my mind. And that ended up leading me to, you know, being invited to use Sora, OpenAI's Sora, in the early days. And I had one of the first films, AI films, at a major film festival in Tribeca in 2024. You know, I came up with actually a really interesting idea that people really still love, which is because, you know, I know I was going to get a lot of press. I was probably going to get a lot of shit for, you know, as a traditional filmmaker using AI, and I was like, you know, I want to do something special. So the way I approached it was I ended up coming up with this idea that if you generate actors, right, or characters doing something that in a country like Iran, where there's tremendous amount of censorship, if they are able to do things that normally they would be thrown into prison for or killed for, guess what? You can't do that with a generated actor. And so that was a really interesting moment. It ended up getting a lot of press, and that and actually was the first AI film to be streamed into Iran, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan as you know, a show of solidarity. But because of that press, that was partially why we were able to form massive studios and met with, you know, the biggest producers in Hollywood, etc. And you know, I will say this, that we, in addition to like commercials, etc., you know, that we do, we're really committed to making films for the cinema. And so we have 3 films, feature-length films, in production with the great Roger Avery, you know, who won, whose film Pulp Fiction with Tarantino won the Palme d'Or here. We're making them with him. And we have, these films are going to be exclusive to the cinema, and they're going to have really, really long windows, and are going to be and stay in the cinema. And I actually think that AI is going to help save the cinemas, because we're going to be able to tell a lot more original stories instead of the same old, that comes into the cinemas.
That sounds really exciting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really. We will have to stop. I'm
Okay,
so
thank you
sorry.
so much.
Reza, it was really a powerful speech, what you said. I was very touched, I guess everybody here were. So thank you so much for what you share with us.
Thank you.
Thank you again. Say thank you again, applause.